I'm grateful to you, Mr Speaker, for granting the urgent question and for the Home Secretary's response. Indeed, it's good to see the Right Honourable Lady, and I hope we will see her again to answer questions on how 400,000 police records were deleted and give us the promised update on that matter. The efforts of the British people and the hopes of the vaccine are being undermined by the government's inability to secure our borders against COVID. Conservative incompetence is putting our country at risk. Labour is calling for a comprehensive hotel quarantine system with protections to secure us against new strains. It cannot be restricted to only a handful of countries, leaving gaping holes in our defences against different strains of the virus emerging around the world. And the government must announce a sector support package for aviation. The government's proposals being briefed to the press are half-baked and will be ineffective. As ever, it's too little, too late. And from the start of the pandemic, the government's handling of measures at the border has been chaotic. There hasn't been a comprehensive strategy, as the Home Secretary suggested. Indeed, from January last year to the 23rd of March, only 273 people were formally quarantined. I wrote to the Home Secretary in April and asked her to learn the lessons of that. But still by May, the UK was an international outlier with virtually no travel controls. And when formal quarantining was introduced in June, the policy was so badly handled it was ineffective. It isn't being properly enforced. And the government's own figures show that only 3% of people are being successfully contacted to ensure they're observing the quarantine. Even the introduction, Mr Speaker, of mandatory testing was delayed because the government couldn't get the structures in place. Now, on the brief plans for hotel quarantine, can the Home Secretary confirm when formal plans will be introduced? Will they be comprehensive or limited to a few countries? And if it is limited, how would that be acceptable when the quarantining system is in such disarray? Put simply, what confidence can the public have in the government on this issue if ministers are not prepared to learn from their own mistakes?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Let me just begin by starting by saying that I welcome the Honourable Gentleman's chance for us to discuss these measures, and he's also mentioned about the PNC, which we will provide an update in due course. I can just give him that reassurance. I think, first of all, Mr Speaker, there has been a comprehensive strategy across government, and it actually dates back to January last year, from the 27th of January. The Honourable Gentleman will be fully aware and cited off that. That started with travel advice, FCO in particular, followed by guidance by SAGE, right down from the 10th of February last year, new statutory instruments, regulations, new powers of medical professions and the police to detain individuals carrying symptoms of coronavirus, guidance to airports around how to handle coronavirus in February last year, and then a flurry of travel advice, then supported by self-isolation measures, and in March, of course, the Coronavirus Act. But then the parcel of mandatory quarantine, passenger locator forms, shutting the border with Denmark when the new strain was identified, test and release, banning flights, as I said already, from South Africa, pre-travel tests and carrier liability. This is a comprehensive approach and a comprehensive strategy. And I would just like to say, Mr Speaker, on this, it's important to note that throughout, when it comes to coronavirus and measures at the border that involve other government departments as well, the measures set out naturally come with logistical and operational challenges to work with. So I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr Speaker, to thank our operational partners, our airports in particular, Border Force, who've been on the front line day in, day out, checking passengers. I mentioned the figure earlier on about the number of checks, and Border Force are now checking 100% of passengers arriving in the UK. We have the Isolation Assurance Service as well. They're increasing the number of checks to 5,000 per day, and the National Police Chief Councils are already surging capacity as well to provide those checks. I think, just if I may, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman has referred to newspaper reports and speculation. It would be wrong of me, Mr Speaker, to speculate about any measures that are not in place right now as policy is being developed. But the Honourable Gentleman does speak about quarantining, and he claims that his party has been calling for tougher restrictions. But I think also the party opposite, if I may say so, should also reflect on their position. Because in August last year, the Honourable Gentleman himself called quarantine a blunt tool. In July, the Shadow Transport Secretary said quarantine measures should be lessened. And in June last year, the leader of the opposition also said that this system was a blunt instrument. Measures are always under review. It is right that the government reviews all measures. And as I said in my statement, Mr. Speaker, we do have a world-leading vaccination programme. We are proud of that programme, and the government will do everything that it can to protect that vaccine from new strains of the virus.